Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Clambake on the Circle G. Welcome, Martha. Welcome, Keith. And Martha says that she loved Clambake, and Elvis was so handsome in that movie, and that she's a huge fan of Shelley. And if she's not mistaken, she thinks Red West had a cameo in the movie. And Keith says he just watched Clambake, and that Elvis is moving around pretty good for being overweight and suffering from saddle sores caused by being on the Circle G. Well, it's interesting you say that, Keith, because by the time Elvis starts shooting Clambake, being overweight, having saddle sores, those are the least of his physical problems. And it's not very far in the future. But before we get there, we've got to say hello to Marion and hello to Chillin' in Canada. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I appreciate seeing you here. We've got to get back to what this series, Signed, Sealed, Remembered, is all about, and that's the document itself. Elvis reflected through the written record. Things like receipts. Now we're going to talk about some receipts from January 1967, just before he buys the ranch. I don't actually have images of these receipts. I've never seen them myself. I've just got references to them from various sources. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here, too. But these receipts, they show that Elvis purchased, in January 1967, some horses, starting with a black mare and a buckskin mare and a horse named Keno, specifically for Red West, and a bay mare and a white buckskin and a quarter horse named Conchita's Gold and a red chestnut gelding and a Palomino mare. So that's 8 horses. Now we saw Gary Pepper list the names of 17 horses. So this isn't all the horses that were in the barns and stables at Graceland, but this is referencing documents that show that he actually purchased, for sure, these 8 horses. And Larry Geller, who was Elvis's hairstylist and had started working for him in the mid-1960s. Larry used to work for Jay Sebring. Jay Sebring, well, he was with Sharon Tate the night that the Charles Manson gang broke in. They slaughtered them all. And it really affected Elvis, but that's still in the future. Hasn't happened in 1967. But that is where Larry Geller came from. And he's here at this time. He's at Graceland, and he's at the Circle G when it gets started. And he says, Elvis wanted us all to have a horse. Elvis wanted to include everybody in his dream of having a horse. That's what Larry's trying to tell us. To bring all of his friends along with him on this great adventure of learning to bond with these magnificent animals. Hello, Anna. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And on January 31st, 1967. And that's only a relatively few days before Elvis purchased the Circle G. Just shortly before he saw the cross on the hill at dawn, that was the sign to him that he needed to purchase this new property. Just a few days before that, on January 31st, Elvis bought a Texas-bred horse with a white star on its forehead named Pokey Dunnett. And that horse was for Larry Geller. And Larry said, "This horse was perfect for me. Even the kids would ride him and really enjoy it." So Larry was able to share his horse, not just, it wasn't just his. He shared it with his family, his wife and his children. And they all had fun. And this was at Graceland before they went to the Circle G. And it's not just Larry. He's bought these other 8 horses that we've just seen. And Gary's telling us there's a total of 17. And each of those horses has one of these Memphis Mafia members, one of his friends, and their families connected to it. Their wives and their children. Because that's what Elvis is thinking about right now. Wives, children. And George Klein said he just kept buying more and more horses and more gear. And what that really means to us who are listening to George is that Elvis was bringing in more and more people. Every one of those horses had a person and that family attached to it. That gear was for that new family he was bringing into the group. And Larry Geller says, Elvis called us into the tack room. Then he brought us all to a tack store where we all got riding gear. It was fantastic. Elvis was so happy. Now, tack, that's all the assorted stuff, mostly leather gear that you have to ride a horse. Like a saddle and a bridle and a feed bag maybe, and stirrups and all kinds of stuff, anything that you would need to have to ride the horse, saddle blankets, all of that kind of stuff. Elvis has got a room in the barn, the tack room, and it's got all that kind of stuff in it. And so Larry and his family have gone in there and they picked out what they can that's on the shelves that's not reclaimed. But it's not enough, and Elvis doesn't believe it's enough. He wants them to have all new stuff, even though I'm sure everything in that tack room is all new. So he takes them to the tack store, and he has a couple, maybe more tack stores that he goes to. But yesterday we saw one. So if you missed that episode yesterday, in the previous episode, I encourage you to go back and watch that one, because it talks about a local family that owned a saddlery, which is a tack store, in the Memphis area, and that Elvis knew from before he became famous, when he was just on the way up, and he had bought a belt there with his name on it. That must have been like 1954, maybe 1955. Hi, Memphis Flash Richie. Thank you so much for coming. Keith's saying that he's sure that Elvis had a great vet, too, for the horses. Well, Keith, that might come up today. And Larry also tells us that it made Elvis happy to buy people, including his family, these Western things, the apparel, the tack, the stuff, so that they could be part of the dream. Just like we heard from Danny Smith in the previous episode, Elvis had bought him a coat. Danny's just a little feller at this time, so it's a little coat. But Elvis wasn't leaving anybody out, not even the kids. He was bringing everybody into this dream, which became way too big to hold at Graceland. And Larry Geller says, the back of Graceland had only so much land. We were all riding every day, going as fast as we could. Elvis realized we needed more space. And that's when Elvis really started looking, I think, in his mind. Wasn't really telling anybody yet. And then one thing led to another, and while he was out purchasing a horse for his father, he saw a cross on a hill. And Jack Adams, the man who owned that property, the man who put the cross there, and built the lake that the cross is next to, and it overlooks. Jack Adams said, God told me to build the cross. It was well constructed. It was really pretty to see. I had a gentleman build it in Memphis. They hauled it down here and set it up so that it was freestanding. So Jack Adams had that cross constructed, had it put where it was, and that's the signal that Elvis saw that started the whole Circle G adventure. Although there was pressure from home because he was outgrowing Graceland with this horse hobby. And at the Graceland kitchen table, Larry Geller sat and he watched as Elvis sketched out what would later become the logo for the Circle G, which we've seen. It is a circle with a G in it and wings to the side. So Elvis brought those wings to the Circle G. And Larry says, Elvis fell in love with the ranch. He was searching for meaning outside of being Elvis Presley. He was looking for grounding and searching for his identity as a human being, and his career simply did not fill that hole. So Larry says, and he's reinforcing the idea that returning to Hollywood at this moment to do this movie, Clambake, that's not internally fulfilling to Elvis. And that's one of the reasons that he's delaying his departure. That he's out on the horse so much, and that he's developed these saddle sores. And it's also one of the reasons he's bought the ranch in the first place, so that he can put his creativity into it, because his creative spirit is not making it into his career. It's not in the movies. It's not in the songs. Some of his vocal stylings are there. Some of his trademark humor. There's enough of him in the movie for Keith and Martha to like it as a movie. I like it as a movie too. But it wasn't internally fulfilling to him in any way on a creative level, and that's what the Circle G is now providing. Almost as if he was a painter, and he's now found his paints and his canvas. And Joe Esposito says he no longer looked like a famous singer and a movie star. Wearing a cowboy hat and a sheepskin jacket, sitting tall in the saddle, he was a dead ringer for the Marlboro Man. I have a lot of trouble saying that. Marlboro Man, who was a cigarette advertising campaign figure, who was used in advertisements for this cigarette. And that figure originated in the United States, and it was used from 1954 to 1999. So by 1967, it was an established figure. And on the screen, we can see a picture of Larry Geller, and he's with Elvis as they ride at Graceland. This was during the time that Elvis was taking Larry's family to the saddlery and getting them all hooked up with what they needed for their horse. This is a picture of the Marlboro Man. And he's not quite in the outfit that Joe described him, but this is an advertisement from 1967, from the year of the Circle G. So this is what this advertising figure looked like during this year. And here's some artwork of the same figure. So this is kind of the aesthetic that Elvis is bringing to the Graceland, and then he's taking it to the Circle G, transplanting it to the Circle G. And Richie's saying, I bet it was amazing for them living there at the Circle G, and shame Elvis couldn't have kept it. And that he also loves Clambake. And Marion's asking, did Vernon ever ride a horse? Yes, absolutely, Marion. He rode with all the guys. So when there's stories of the guys out there riding their horses, Vernon's right there with them. All that fun that the guys had, Vernon had it with them. He wasn't excluded, and he was right in the middle of it most times. So you don't hear as much about him because the guys are all focused on Elvis. So in the books that they write, the stories that they tell, they're all Elvis central, right? Which is what we expect, because that's why we're purchasing the book. But Vernon's right there. He's right next to them all. He's the one that's financing the whole thing. Elvis is paying for it, but Vernon's figuring out how to logistically get the money to whoever has to have it. Because mostly what Elvis does is say, I'm going to pay for it. He doesn't actually carry cash. He rarely carries the checkbook and writes the checks. He does the least minimum work possible when he does the purchase, and Vernon takes care of all the rest of it. In most cases. But he's right there in on the fun. And anything he wants to do, he can do. He's invited to everything. And Keith's saying that EP smoked those little black cigars. That's correct. Not cigarettes themselves, but those little black cigars. And Richie's saying there's pics with Vernon on horses. Here's another illustration of this advertising guy. And Dr. Nick, we were talking about him yesterday in the last episode. And he had left the Circle G and he'd gone home. And he'd had to work overnight in order to get these papers ready for the insurance companies. And he says that the next day I went to Graceland to examine Elvis again and to give him copies of the letters I had mailed to Colonel Parker for the insurance company. I obtained a very brief medical history to insert into his patient file. And at that time, Elvis confided that insomnia had been a major problem for him throughout his life. Now, those of us who have followed Elvis for a long time, read a lot of the books, we're aware that Elvis had a problem with insomnia. He used to sleepwalk at one point. Seems to have grown out of that by the time he went to the army. And it doesn't seem to have plagued him after the army, but the insomnia has always stuck with him. And Dr. Nick says, and he sometimes took sedatives to help him sleep. So Elvis has now confided in Dr. Nick that he has some sort of dependency on medication. Maybe it's an occasional medication, like he's saying. He says sometimes. But he's alerting Dr. Nick that he may need sedatives at some point. And Dr. Nick says he also shared that he occasionally took amphetamines to stay awake when he drove across country, since he didn't like to fly, to make the early morning call times on the movie set. So Elvis has confided another need to Dr. Nick, that at some point there's a good chance he's going to ask Dr. Nick for some amphetamines. That there's downers and there's uppers, and he's in a cycle where he needs to use these, and it's because of his career. And Dr. Nick listens, and he absorbs this knowledge, and he responds by saying, what I need most to know is if you have any drug allergies. So Dr. Nick is trying to get some very basic information to fill out a form. And the form's not asking anything about what Elvis may or may not need or uses on an occasional basis. It's really asking about any allergies. And Elvis has gone ahead and confided these things in Dr. Nick. To me, it shows that he already trusts Dr. Nick. By the second day, Dr. Nick is in. Even if Dr. Nick doesn't notice that he's in, he's in. He's in the group. And like everyone within the group, they each serve a need that Elvis has. That's why they're there. Sometimes it's just a regular kind of everyday, every person would have this need. And sometimes it's more specific, it requires a specialist. Like in this case, he needs a doctor, and he needs someone to help him with his prescriptions. He has a dependency on prescriptions at this point, I think it's safe to say. He's not really revealed that to the doctor yet. And I'm not sure that he realizes that he has a dependency, but he is making moves to ensure that he has a supply, which is an indication. And there's reasons, like true medical reasons, he may be doing this because he feels pain, because there's a good chance that his colon is giving him a lot of problems at this point. Not severe enough to keep him away from the set or making the movies or anything, but it's a very slow and ongoing process that will take another 10 years. But Elvis tells Dr. Nick, when he's asked about the allergies, he says, yes, sir, codeine makes me itch. So after Elvis passes away, and if you're following the Mystery of August 16th, 1977 series, you know that there's a lot of questions as of day one about a drug overdose. And the police have said that they are not investigating a drug overdose. They see no indications of a drug overdose. And they're basing what they're saying on what the Dr. Francisco, who conducted the autopsy, said, which is he didn't find any indication of drug overdose, that he did not believe drugs played any part in the death. But there were a lot of other sources, mostly connected to a specific book that was being published at that very moment. And another 250,000 copies were about to be printed that weekend in stores ready to sell. Well, it had a different theory, and it swore that even though the people that wrote that book hadn't seen Elvis in over a year, that Elvis died of a drug overdose. And then that kept running for years and years and years. Still going today. But one of these things is about the codeine. And that he had a prescription for codeine, but he was really allergic to it, and back and forth. But the point that I'm bringing up here is that this is Elvis isn't necessarily allergic to it. It makes him itch, is what he's telling Dr. Nick. And so Dr. Nick would be aware that he has this allergy. And of course, the codeine, it comes from a different source, from a dentist. But then there's a question about why would Elvis want that if it made him itch? But this is where that information comes from. Codeine makes me itch, is what he told Dr. Nick. And Dr. Nick says, I thought that was peculiar. Most people allergic to codeine complain of nausea more than anything else. And Elvis said he took codeine for injuries on the movie set and for occasional headaches. So that's really interesting too, right? It makes him itch. But he still takes it. Still needs the relief that it brings, even though it does something else to him. Now, some people would say that's an indication he was using it to get high, and that he's willing to put up with the itch in order to get high. I don't know. But he's telling Dr. Nick about the codeine, which again signals to me that he may ask Dr. Nick in the future for codeine, but he didn't bring it up by himself. He was prompted into that by the question about allergies. I think it's a much stronger case with the amphetamines and the sleeping pills. Those are two things he really is going to need. And he's going to ask Dr. Nick for. And Elvis frames his use of these sedatives and amphetamines, these uppers and these downers, as a coping mechanism, a way to meet the demands of this life that he doesn't always choose. That Dr. Nick can see he's suffering now with these saddle sores and this decision not to report to the movie on time. And so he shared some of his pain with Dr. Nick, and now he's sharing some more, that I have enough other pain, other needs, that I have to take these medications. And I think this is part of the empathy that Dr. Nick is known for. He listens to people. And although he's the one telling the story, within the story, he doesn't really respond to Elvis about this at this time. He just absorbs the information. He listens. And Richie is saying that addiction is a horrible thing. Colleen agrees and that it affects many people. Richie says that Elvis didn't die of a drug overdose, but it definitely was to do with Elvis's passing. Perhaps, but that's not what Dr. Francisco said. So that's what we have to bear in mind as we look at that mystery, but that's a different series. Colleen says that codeine makes her itch too, especially her nose. And Marion says the itching might be less terrible than headaches. Colleen agrees, and so I would agree with that too. There's a side effect to all kinds of different medications. Sometimes the side effects are worth it to get the main effect of the medication. And it's at this point, after Dr. Nick has absorbed this knowledge, that he leaves the ranch. And he really never returns to it. That's the end of Dr. Nick's association with the ranch. In February, in those 2 days. So he's not there as Elvis continues to build up the ranch to live out his dream. He's not there when it ends. He doesn't really come back into the picture until 1970. Maybe a little earlier than that. But he's out. He's kind of outside the entire circle for a while because Elvis doesn't really need his services for a period. And so Elvis is left on the ranch. He stays. And he continues to build his dream. And you might ask what his dream was. Well, we heard him tell us in 1963 in a magazine interview about his heart's desire. And that's what I wrote this song about. And as you listen to this song and what Elvis wanted in 1963, 4 years prior, which he still doesn't have, he has not achieved his heart's desire, according to what he says in the magazine article. But all of his friends, or most of them, have. And they're all around him, and they're sharing these horses. You know, is it any wonder that Elvis chose this year? People can say he was pressured or that he was coerced, but is it any wonder that after Elvis got onto the Circle Ranch, and we heard Dr. Nick say it was the most relaxed he ever saw him in his entire life, that at this moment of peace and contentment, that Elvis determines that it's the moment to reach out and make his heart's desire come true. And he chooses this year to get married.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. 63, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he given in his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of a hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given his best.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we explore caring on the grounds of the Circle G. And in the comments, Richie is saying that in his opinion, Dr. Nick and the Memphis Mafia were bad news for Elvis, and that they used him a lot, and that it was sad because he was such a beautiful soul. And Keith notes that they all pretty much grew up and lived with EP. First generation of that inner circle certainly did. And mostly the first, all the ones that he started with in 1960 after he came back, except the ones that he brought directly from the army. But then after that, they started to fall away, and he had to replace them with people he didn't know as well. And by the 1970s, I think that was a real issue for him. And Chillin' in Canada is saying that pain management wasn't what it is today. And that's absolutely true. And some of the pain management actually grew directly out of what Elvis went through. Because there's this guy who wrote a book, a doctor, and I don't remember his name specifically, but he had theories that are somewhat like the theories in Destined to Die Young, but he wrote his book previously. He's a pain management doctor, and he spoke on Dr. Nick's behalf when Dr. Nick was on trial, or I don't know the exact term. He was up for, I think, a certification or a licensing board, something like that. But I think he was also on a trial, and this gentleman was involved in one or both of those proceedings. He had opened a giant pain management clinic, I think in California. And so it was very important that he be able to show that Dr. Nick had not overprescribed to Elvis or Jerry Lee Lewis or these others. because that's basically what his entire business model was built upon. Was a pain management clinic? His was the first in the country. And basically at that time, it was a pill factory. You went in, you got your prescription, you went out and got your pills. So he then defended Dr. Nick, which ties him into the Elvis story, and then wrote this book in which it was very important to him to show that Elvis did not die from drugs. And so now you get these mixed reasons that people have put out their books and theories and such about what ultimately happened to Elvis. And they're all out there mixing together. But like in the case of that doctor, they don't really have anything to do with Elvis. They have more to do with defending his practice by defending Dr. Nick. And so it gets extremely confusing as to what is real and what isn't. And even though he's a doctor, how much weight do you give his opinion? Because he has a massive amount of money tied into ensuring his pain clinics remain legal. And he got a lot of publicity from that book. But I'm way off track. And so we've got to bring it back to 1967, get back onto the Circle G, and Becky Yancey, who works in the office at Graceland at this time, works for Vernon, works for Elvis. She says if Elvis was going to be a cattle rancher, he was going to have some of the best stock in the South. He bought good animals, and the telephones were busy for a while with calls from cattlemen conferring with Elvis or his employees. Many of the animals arrived with papers certifying their lineage and breeding, and that meant more work for me to do. I typed several letters Ralph Boucher dictated over the telephone. Now we know that Ralph, he's the man that actually takes care of feeding and caring for the cattle. And here Becky's telling us that Elvis is actively purchasing more cattle. So we heard he started with 18, but then we heard from Jack, who sold the property and the cattle, it was 150. And now we're hearing from Becky, it's more than 150 now. Elvis is buying new animals, that he's not just into the horses. He's bought all in as a rancher, and he's going to breed this cattle stock. And he's ramping the ranch up to be able to do that. And Memphis Flash Richie says that he agrees it was a pill factory and he just wishes Elvis could have got away from the lot of them. And that they were all bad news, and that's just his opinion. And all opinions are welcome here. Feel free to put them in the comments and put them into the chat. We'll talk about them. And I understand exactly where Richie's coming from. I've read those books and I've seen that view of Dr. Nick and the rest of them too. And I can't really speak about any of them as people. I never met Dr. Nick. I did meet Dr. Nick's son, Dean, and he was a lovely individual. He was very warm and open, answered every question that I asked him, was very kind to me. So I did very much like Dean Nicopolis. I believe he's still selling cars in Memphis today. So if you wanted to buy a new car and you're in the Memphis area, you might be able to buy it directly from Dean. And while you're putting in your comment in your chat, make sure that you give us a like, that you're subscribed, that you've hit the notification button so that you've got the best chance that YouTube will tell you the next time I'm on live, which is going to be 24 hours from now, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or whenever this is for you, wherever you're at in the world. I'll be back on 24 hours from now. We'll be talking about Elvis again. And make sure that you tell everybody that you know that loves Elvis all about Hillbilly Cat history so that they can come and join us here too, here on the live stream, as we learn all of this interesting information. At least I hope you guys all find it interesting about the Circle G. And let's get back to Becky, and she's typing letters. And now we get to something Keith mentioned. Doctor, known as Doc, Edward Franklin, he's the veterinarian that tended the animals at both Graceland and Circle G. And Dr. Franklin was educated at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville in pre-veterinary studies. And he graduated from Auburn University Veterinary School of Medicine. And the doctor served as a captain in the U.S. Army, and then he obtained a law degree. Dr. Franklin practiced veterinary medicine at Rains Road Animal Clinic in Whitehaven and DeSoto County Animal Clinic in South Haven. And those are basically the two areas that are right around Graceland in the south of Memphis. And we talked yesterday about Ricky Stanley's feathery blonde hair. He always wore it in a pattern that they called feathering in the 1970s. So it looked like a bird's wings on either side of his head. And then Elvis would call him the Raven from Whitehaven. And what Dr. Franklin says is what Elvis did to the horse market in northern Mississippi was unbelievable. We would go out and look at a horse that was a $300 horse. And when the people found out it was maybe for Elvis, it became a $3,000 horse. So, Richie, it wasn't just the Memphis Mafia out there looking to take advantage of Elvis. People wanted to charge Elvis 10 times what it was worth. Keith says that Dean is putting together a book. Well, Keith, I hope you can get him to come on over here to Hillbilly Cat History and hook up over here, and maybe I can help him out with that. That would be an extremely interesting project. Don't know if he has anybody attached to it yet. Memphis Flash Richie is mentioning that Priscilla has got a new book out. She does, and she's got plenty of her own publicity. I saw that she's out on a lot of news and talk show. You know, she's out on the junket right now, so plenty of information about her out there if you guys are interested. Now, Elvis also employed a man named Lem Couch as farrier. And that means that the guy who shoes the horses and he cares for their hooves. Sometimes you got to shave the hooves of the horses as they grow, kind of like fingernails. And Lem had graduated from farrier school the year before, so he's a little new at this. And Lem shoed and cared for the hooves of Elvis's horses till Elvis passed away. So he didn't work for him just on the Circle G. When it all closed down, he came on back to Graceland, worked in the stables. Elvis chatted often with Lem in the barn as he went about his work, and Lem remembers that sometimes they played card games together in the tack room. So, somewhat like Becky Yancey, Elvis would sometimes seek this person out, person who worked for him, on the ground. It's not one that we've really ever heard of. a person that shows up in many of the stories, but Elvis would spend time just chatting him up. Sometimes they even played cards together. And Joe Esposito and his wife Joni and Marty, it's Marty Lacker, and Elvis were driving around Circle G. And I think this must have been around the time of the March snowstorm, which I think had to have been right after Dr. Nick was there. I'm not positive about this. Haven't lined it all up with any weather reports yet. Probably one of the pieces that I'll eventually get to. But it had to have happened sometime around now. They're driving around. And Marty Lacker says, Elvis, on the left side of this driveway, your land goes all the way to the fence and back. Why don't you deed 1 acre of land to each of the guys and the down payment to build a house on it? Because essentially, that's what he'd done for me. I just moved into my new house. So prior to that house, Marty had lived at Graceland in what had been the garage and been converted to an apartment. Now, at the end of his life, Vernon will be living in that apartment. But it was Marty and his family, which was his wife and his 2 girls. And now Marty has bought a house and he's been able to move into it because Elvis has done these financial things for him. He's purchased some land and given him enough for the down payment, basically. That's what Marty's telling us in his words right here. And Marty says that most of the guys had always had the dream of owning their own house someday. And you could make that dream come true, Elvis, and your dream by having them all together. You could stipulate that they should stop working for you, or if they were fired, or if anybody leaves, you would have the option of buying their house and land at current market value. That way, you wouldn't have anyone living here if you didn't want them. You'll hold on to your land and keep the outsiders out. So Marty's idea is that these guys are going to pay for their own houses, but always kind of be on tippy toes that if they do anything wrong, they won't be able to stay there. And Elvis, he'll give them the money for the house, but they'll have to leave, right? I don't know that that sounds like that great a deal because that's not Marty's deal. Marty's deal is he's got this house that's outside of Circle G, and even if he stops working for Elvis, he'll still have the house. And Chillin' in Canada is saying that Marty got married in 1967. I don't think that's true, Chillin'. I'm fairly certain he was married before 1960, because or 61, because I'm pretty positive that that's the first time he went out with Elvis to Hollywood, and he had to ask his wife then. So he'd been married previous to that, and I think he was married before Elvis went to the army. Not positive. I'll have to look that up. Well, Marty says that Elvis's fate, Elvis loved that idea. That he loved the idea of offering this chance to purchase these homes and giving this land to the guys. Marty says his face just lit up. He said, Moon, you got it. Man, that's fantastic. That's what I want to do. Let's do it. And Joe and Joni were ecstatic. That's Joe Esposito and Joni Esposito, his wife. It says Joe and Joni were just jumping up and down because nobody in the group had a home of his own except for me and Lamar. Now, I've got to admit, I did not know Lamar had his own home. I mean, I guess I should have, but I didn't realize Lamar had his own home. Like, at any point in time, I never really thought about it. I kind of always thought he was like Charlie, but I know he didn't live at the house the whole time. So that's some interesting information, that Lamar owns a home. And Chillin's pointing out that the AI could be wrong. That's what I run into a lot, Chillin. So it's not an issue. And that's why we're doing the show, so that we can get down to as source information as possible. But I'm fairly certain he tells us in his book, so I'll try to look it up and maybe I'll have that for us. I'd like to kind of do a special show on each of the guys to give them their own, like, you know, like little history so that people could get to know them better. I think that would help a lot when we tell other stories and these guys show up, and it would help me to condense their life into a small paragraph of the other stories as well. So we may very well do a series where we meet different people from the lives of Elvis. But this is as far as we're going to make it today. Marty has breached or broached, or I'm not sure the right word there, this idea with Elvis, and it sounds like, you know, a good idea, but it's not going to work out the way that Elvis wants it to, and it's going to be one of these things that starts internal pressure, internal stress from the ranch itself, that is then, you know, magnified by the stress from external that he's trying to get away from. And Marion says that would be a great idea to do a series about the individuals that she doesn't know much about them. He's saying that EP was giving these guys great deals. And Keith's saying he believes Lamar was married a few times also. I know he was married at least once. No, I don't know about a few times. I don't know that much, but I do know for sure once. And I actually met the woman that he was married to. Colleen's saying thanks. She's got to go off to take care of the grandbabies. Have a good one, Colleen. And I'm going to leave you guys with a song like I've been doing. And this is a song that talks about Donna Presley's experiences on the ranch. They call it He Gave Us Everything. And Donna Presley has heard this song. She's told me that she likes it very much.
Oh, 17, snow on the ground, Circle G, love all around. He bought that ranch, opened the gate, said come on in, let's celebrate. Tractor pulling through the snow, laughter rising, spirits glow. Both behind, wives and men, family fun again and again. He wasn't just a star in lights, he was the warmth in winter nights. Kindness wrapped in velvet flame, a heart that never played the fame. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack us everything. Riding horses, legs so still, bridge and cross on the quiet hill. Barbecue smoke, stories told, moments more precious than gold. He'd ask me who I'm dating now, what I dream, what I'll allow. He cared like kin, not just a name. You live for love, not for acclaim. He wasn't just a voice on stage, he was the soul behind the page. A man who'd sing to heal your day and laugh at midnight blues away. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight rain. He gave us love, he gave us grace. Circle G, where the angels sing. He gave us everything. A shadow in the night, famous face, but heart so bright. Couldn't walk the street like you and me, so we built a world where we were free. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight rain. He gave us love, he gave us way. Gave us everything. Yes, he gave us everything.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. 6 is 3, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home. To be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given in his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of a hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home.